We all want to have a Mandarin learning breakthrough, a sudden improvement in our language abilities. But are you fostering the right environment for that to happen? What if I had told you Mandarin breakthroughs don't happen by accident? In this video, I'll break down the exact reasons why you haven't yet had a breakthrough in your Mandarin learning and exactly what you should be doing about this. The number one reason you're not experiencing listening, reading and speaking breakthroughs in the language is because you're not giving yourself the chance to. Now hear me out, let me explain. You see, to experience a breakthrough in the language, you need to make your progress feel tangible. Like that increase in your ability, you need to be able to actually personally, almost physically feel it. And in all honesty, when we're studying Mandarin, we don't really give ourselves the chance to experience that. Why? Because we progressively listen to things or read things that are harder and harder. And obviously to improve in the language, that's a great thing to do, and I highly encourage you should do that. But if you want to make your progress feel tangible in the language, then there are two things on top of this that you also need to be doing. I remember when I first started learning Mandarin, I watched a really awesome detective drama that I really enjoyed called 白夜追凶. And because I watched it when I just started learning the language, there were 32 episodes. I probably understood a grand total of like 5 words out of everything. I was pretty reliant on English subtitles. I then rewatched it a few years later without English or Mandarin subtitles, and I found I could understand 100% of it. And so you could say I had a listening breakthrough because I could tangibly feel my improvement in my Mandarin listening abilities. Why? Because I actually went and manifested the breakthrough by rewatching things that I had previously watched. And here's the thing, rewatching, re-listening, rereading, these are exactly the kind of things that will show you how far you've actually come. When I met a close friend of mine, just having learnt Mandarin for about a few months at the time, we could hardly understand each other. At the time I had a really dodgy mix of British and Beijing accent when I spoke Mandarin, combined with my dodgy tones and rhythm that didn't quite really work. And my friend, on the other hand, whenever he spoke Mandarin, he just spoke it really fast. Last year, when I went and did 5 months of my PhD research completely in Mandarin over at Beijing 大学医学部, I invited him over to our campus and took him around. And we played table tennis together, we went and explored the campus together, ate loads of great food. It was awesome. And it was a sudden realization at that time that the language barrier that existed between us 5 or 6 years ago was gone. It had completely disappeared. So the first key I've been trying to show you through these stories is that if you want to have a Mandarin breakthrough, you need to give yourself the opportunity to do so. And how do you do that? Well, you go back to the things that at the time felt really challenging and impossible to overcome, and you go back to them a few months or maybe even a few years later. And when you do so, I'm sure your brain will give you a complete surprise and show you that all the hard work you've been putting into Mandarin hasn't been wasted, it's just really started to pay off. You just haven't shown yourself that's the case yet. The second reason is that your learning methods mean that you're just improving too slowly to actually really feel your progress. And here's the thing, like over the last year or two, I've seen loads of students have breakthroughs in Mandarin just by doing a few simple things, and here they are. Listening and imitating lots. I get a lot of students to do what sounds on the surface really simple, which is just listen and repeat. But in reality, what I get them to do is like sentence by sentence imitation. So we take a story, it's read out at full speed, then line by line, giving the student time to imitate the native speaker after every line. And I found that works really quite well for building confidence and improving rhythm and intonation. The second part is using evidence-based learning strategies, using strategies that involve recall, elaboration, and spaced repetition, and combining these to, form a complete system that will actually mean you retain what you learn and you're not just forgetting and relearning all the time. If you want help with doing any of those things, I have quite a lot of free resources that I regularly share with my Chunking Chinese community. So if any of that interests you, you're more than welcome to check out the link. It's down in the description below. The next reason is that you're not being consistent enough to actually have a breakthrough. Breakthroughs require consistency. They need constant constant effort to happen and not just kind of like stopping and starting, as many of us fall into this vicious cycle of doing so. I'm not in any way saying that you need to be a productivity guru or you need to turn into, you know, some kind of willpower expert or anything like that. Actually, quite the opposite. Hear me out. All consistency requires is actually knowing what the real enemy is, and the real enemy is not your willpower. The real enemy is not you, whether you're a productivity guru. The real enemy is friction. Friction is the invisible force that's stopping you studying Mandarin as much as you should be, and it comes in many different flavors. Let's have a look at the common ones. Number of steps is one of the first flavors. If every time I wanted to listen to a podcast in Mandarin Chinese, I had to first go and find my phone, then go and find my headphones, then download multiple different podcasts, check which one's the right level for me, and then I've got to go and charge my wireless headphones before I leave the house as well, because otherwise, you know, they might run out of battery. I've also got to make sure that I've got good internet access the whole time I'm out. You know, that crazy number of steps, at some point my brain's just going to go, you know what, Will, forget it, let's just not listen to a podcast in Mandarin today. And that's a big example of friction. So the first one, number of steps to actually do what you're supposed to be doing. Now, another one is actually cost. So if the only way you can practice Mandarin speaking is by spending an awful lot of money on tutoring, but your financial situation doesn't allow you to do that, then that would obviously be a huge barrier and a huge invisible force, a form of friction to you actually practicing speaking. And if that is the case for you, I'd highly recommend going and checking out my video about how to speak Mandarin alone, because this was obviously a problem that I faced as a medical student. I didn't really have much money, so I couldn't just spend a fortune on tutoring. In fact, I never did a single tutoring lesson the whole time I learned Mandarin, and there are plenty of other ways you can do that without spending a single penny. The next form of friction is convenience. So if the only way I was able to read Mandarin novels was if I took one around with me the whole time I'm out and about, well, that's quite inconvenient. I might not be able to carry one all the time. But if I have, you know, novels on my phone, then obviously that's a lot more convenient. So the friction, the form of friction in this situation would be how convenient it is for you to do something. And friction comes in many, many more forms. Now, as you've probably realised, if you want to build a new habit and stay consistent in your Mandarin learning, you need to find ways to decrease friction. And we're absolutely going to talk about that just in a second. But before I do, there's a quick side note here. And that is, if you want to actually break bad habits, then you need to increase the friction. So for example, if you're spending too much time on social media, if you go away and delete all these social media apps, then you're significantly increasing the number of steps you would need to do to go and scroll through social media. So you would first have to, you know, get your phone, re-download all of these apps, re-log into them all over again, and then start scrolling. So that increases the friction so much that you might find that that's just enough to completely break that bad habit. But going back to forming good habits in Mandarin learning, we want to decrease the friction as much as possible. You need to try and find a way to make your Mandarin learning so easy that you just can't not do it. You just can't convince yourself not to do it because it's just effortless. And if you manage to do that, you'll stay consistent for long enough that eventually it just becomes automatic and part of your life. I'll give you a few examples in my study routine. So for podcasts, I subscribe to an absolute ton of different podcasts in Mandarin. I stick them all on auto download so that they all are automatically downloaded so I can listen to them without internet access wherever I am. I try my best to make sure my headphones are actually charged so then I don't have that excuse either. And I try and leave my headphones somewhere visible so I don't have to go and find them. I just, you know, as soon as I'm going to walk out the door, I can pop my headphones in and listen to podcasts. And that series of things that I've done there has decreased the friction so much that even despite working ridiculous hours doing a PhD and, like, you know, running this YouTube channel and doing all of the other stuff that I try and do, I find that I'm able to rack in an awful lot of Mandarin listening practice because of decreasing that friction. The next step is I actually downloaded an app called 番茄小说 on my phone, which is like basically people who aren't professional writers can publish like novels on there in Mandarin, and then you can go and read them. I find it's really cool, and I use that because it's just, again, it's like doesn't need any internet access. It's on my phone, it's easy, I can do it anywhere, and there's also like very, very few ads, and you can even listen to the novels on there as well. So again, that's another great form of like, I don't have to actually physically find or buy novels. I don't have to carry them with me. I don't have to carry any books with me. I just take my phone out and I can read, whenever I've got 5 minutes in a queue or I'm on a bus or something, then those are all opportunities that I could be reading. Now, a big one that's been quite new for me is actually, I found that I was spending an awful lot of time making flashcards. And at the beginning, I would actually recommend you do make all your flashcards manually, and you do learn the ideal way to go about flashcard creation using Anki, so that you understand the principles of what a good flashcard looks like. But because I've been doing this for quite a few years now, I've racked up nearly like 20,000 flashcards in Mandarin at this point. I've decided that it's time for me to just automate that process so it's less painful. So I used a couple of bits of software, the main one being Language Reactor, so that I can just make flashcards from a click of a button from YouTube videos. Now, and again, because I can just add a flashcard from the click of a button, that is reducing the friction so much that I actually, find making flashcards somewhat more enjoyable as a result of that. And I can also make it directly from things that I actually want to watch, content that I actually want to consume in the language. I hope you can kind of take some inspiration and take some ideas from my personal routine there, and this idea of reducing friction to see a breakthrough from your consistency. I'd really like to know what you intend to do in order to reduce the friction in your Mandarin learning routine so you can be more consistent. I kind of want to try and hold you guys accountable for that. So put it down in the comments below, and then you can even come back to it after a few months and see whether you've done what you said you were going to do. Because if you have, I'm sure you'll make huge progress in the language as a result of that. Now, I mentioned this kind of like sentence by sentence imitation practice in the second reason you're not perhaps achieving as many Mandarin breakthroughs as you would like. And if you want to give this style of practice a go, I would highly recommend checking out this video next. It'll just guide you through it step by step. It's really easy to do, and also it's a great way of practicing your Mandarin speaking. So I'll see you inside for that, and I'm looking forward to joining you for that imitation practice.